afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm Danielle Dorey, Director of Program Operations here at the Chamber. Thank you for joining us today for our final Women's Network event of 2021. I'd like to help virtually introduce all of our attendees. I hope you'll take advantage of the chat function to say hello and share your thoughts throughout the program. Please enter any questions for our guest speakers in the Q&A feature on the right-hand side of your screen. This program is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube page next week. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and congratulate all of our 2022 Pinnacle honorees. We have an incredible group this year, and I hope you join in on celebrating them. I'd also like to welcome and congratulate our incoming Women's Network Chair, Susan Leconto-Penta of Meteor Consulting. We're thrilled to have you on board. Lastly, on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to express our gratitude to our current chair, Yvonne Garcia, as she ends her term. We're so appreciative of the incredible commitment, dedication, and leadership that she has brought to the Women's Network over the past 3 years. So much to celebrate as we end the year. Today, we have a powerhouse panel with incredible women who are leading our community and making a lasting impact in the banking and financial industries. Our panelists will discuss innovative leadership strategies, the changing future of the workforce and industry, as well as what is top of mind as we look into 2022. With that, I'd like to give a huge thank you to our sponsor, PwC. Their support and partnership allows us to bring you this program today. Now I'd like to welcome Laura Lynch, Director, Asset and Wealth Management Audit Practice at PwC. Thank you for joining us, Laura. I'll turn it over to you to introduce today's speakers.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. On behalf of PwC, it's my pleasure to introduce today's panel of inspiring leaders. Joining us first is Lisa Murray, President and Head of Not-for-Profit and Professionals Banking at Citizens Massachusetts. With almost 30 years of experience in commercial banking, Lisa represents Citizens in an official capacity with civic, business, and community leaders across the Commonwealth. In her role as Director of the Not-for-Profit and Professionals Banking divisions at Citizens, Lisa leads a team of seasoned industry specialists to assist organizations in managing their businesses more efficiently and profitably while taking risk out of the operating mode. Lisa is passionate about being active in the community, both professionally and personally. She has been involved with the Pine Street Inn, Big Sister Boston, UMass Center for Collaborative Leadership, and Northeastern Center for Family Business. Welcome, Lisa. Next, we have Roxanne Cook. Roxanne is the Consumer Bank Regional Director and Managing Director at JP Morgan Chase. Roxanne is responsible for building strategic business and people priorities to drive the firm's consumer and community bank expansion in New England and the greater Pennsylvania regions. Roxanne is a social advocate who amplifies and supports programs focused on eliminating social and economic disparities. She believes in the power of public-private partnerships and is uniquely skilled at cultivating collaborative relationships to achieve results. Recently, Roxanne was named one of Boston Business Journal's Women Who Mean Business and was announced last week as one of the honorees of the Chamber's 2022 Pinnacle Awards. Thank you for being here with us today, Roxanne. Our next speaker is Vickery Graham. Vickery is chair of BNY Mellon New England and president for wealth management in New England. In this role, Vickery manages the investment management, wealth planning, and private banking services for individuals, entrepreneurs, family business owners, endowments, and foundations. Throughout her career, she has directed both regional and national investment and wealth management businesses, along with private banking services for high net worth individuals. Vickery is also a member of BNY Mellon Women's Initiatives Network and a past vice chair of the BNY Mellon Wealth Management Diversity Council. Vickery is a past honoree of the Chamber's Pinnacle Awards for Achievement in Management and was recognized by the Boston Business Journal for her Advancing Women Leader Legacy Award. Vickery has received the Abigail Adams Award from the Mass Women's Political Caucus and was selected into the WYCA's Boston's Academy of Women Achievers. We're thrilled to have you here today, Vickery. Leading our conversation today, I'd like to welcome Yvonne Garcia. Avon is Chief of Staff to Chairman and CEO and Global Head of Communications, as well as the Head of Global CEO Experience Program at State Street. She is also the Chair of the Women's Network here at the Chamber. Yvonne is a Fortune 500 C-suite executive with more than 25 years of experience. As a multicultural executive, she has deep experience operating in international markets, including Asia Pacific and Latin America. and is highly respected for building strong, sustainable relationships with both internal and external stakeholders. As an active leader of local and national communities, Yvonne served as the chairwoman for the largest Latino professional organization in the country, Alpha, and Yvonne is also the co-founding chair of Milagros para Niños, a board at the Children's Hospital in Boston, which has raised more than 14 million in funds for Hispanic children who can't afford medical care. We are truly honored to have you all here today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. With that, I will turn it over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for those great introductions. And we really appreciate PwC's continued support of the Women's Network, not just today, but in the long-standing partnership that we've had with you. So thank you so much. But we have a really special treat today with three women that I personally admire and respect. I followed them throughout my career, have sought guidance of many of them, and just really honored to be able to have a really important conversation with them. So I'd like to welcome Lisa, Vickery, and Roxanne. I'm so excited to be joined by all of you and really look forward to getting into the conversation, particularly because of the topic at hand and because of who you are and what you represent in our industry, strong, fearless women leaders. So it's no secret that the finance sector, is benefiting greatly from having women like you in leadership positions, doing great things. But however, despite many of improvements that we've made, and we continue to still be underrepresented at all levels of the global financial system. So we thought it would be appropriate as part of our last Women's Network Program of the Year to highlight local female leaders who are making a lasting impact, paving the way for others, inspiring younger generations to help close that gap. As Danielle mentioned, we're going to examine their visions for 2022, what trends they're seeing, and most importantly, seek their advice, right, for women in finance to be able to continue future growth and impact. So let's get into it. I want to maximize the time we have together. So I'll start with the first question. And so the finance industry is not exactly at the front of female representation. There was actually a study with McKinsey that showed that women make up 53% of the entry-level workforce, but less than 1/3 of the SVP and C-suite level. Now, you're all inspiring, strong women leaders in our industry. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you got your start and transitioned into the sector that you're in, and what drew you and kept you motivated to take this career path. Roxanne, why don't we start with you, and then Lisa and Vickery, please join in.
Yvonne, thank you so much for the question. First of all, I want to thank the Chamber for having this forum and to be part of this group with these phenomenal women, and you said impactful, and I've observed and watched their career as well. So thanks to the Chamber, thanks to all our audience members here today. Even though I can't see them, I know they're there and I can feel their energy. And Yvonne, you right back at you. You shared that you have guided and watched our career. And I must say, we have also done that. I personally have done the same with your career. And with the question, almost 30 years in the industry. So I won't walk through each of the 30 years, but I will say how I got here was because of a woman. So I initially wanted to be a medical physician. And during a semester off from school, I took an opportunity and walked into a branch and asked the branch manager for an opportunity. And at that point, she could have said no. I had no experience. I told her I was only going to be there for 6 months because I was heading back to school. So she clearly could have said no, because we all know when we're investing in our people, right, there's a lot of upfront investment. So for someone to say, I'm only here for 6 months, right, your inclination is to say no. But I told her my story about why I wanted that position. She was able to talk through HR and give me that opportunity. And that was a life-altering opportunity. And I must say that woman is Mona Lisa Smith, African-American woman, and representation really matters. But what she did during those 6 months was she also guided me. So internships are important to really change the scope and scale. And after 6 months, I went back to school and realized I came alive during that position. The opportunity to be able to help people, help people with their financial dreams, right, really spoke with me. So I pivoted and came back into the banking sector after graduation. So I now kid people and say that I wanted to be a medical physician, but I'm now a financial physician. And so it was allies and mentors and representation that got me into this seat now. And I said representation matters when it's about having a seat in the suite. And when you can look up and see others that look like you and allies who support and mentor you. I think what keeps me here, though, is opportunities like this, to be able to give back to a larger cause beyond me, right? And to make a difference there. And we know financial health is something that impacts overall health. So to be able to have these conversations, to be in that seat, in the suite, and be able to be that voice for others who can't be there, that's what keeps me motivated and keeps me there. So I appreciate that question, Yvonne.
No, I love your answers, especially that a woman opened first doors for you. And you're absolutely right. We need to be intentional. So representation definitely does matter. I also love that out of everything you talked about, it was really the purpose behind your role that drew you. And we're finding that more and more that people are really leading with purpose and it matters, right? Versus just the transactional aspects of our roles. So thank you for that. Vickery or Lisa?
Sure, I can go next. I echo Roxanne's comments. Thank you to the Chamber. I am absolutely humbled to be on a panel with this group of women and feel privileged to be here today. And also, Roxanne, I know Mona Lisa as well, and she is fantastic. So my story, I came out of school as an economics major in the early 90s when the economy was in recession, and there really weren't many jobs to be had either for men or women at that point. But someone suggested that I apply to 1-800-SHAMIT, which was an old Boston bank that's no longer with us, which is an entry-level job at a call center for retail customers. And it turns out this was really just the perfect place for me to start my journey in the finance industry, because essentially it was all day long. We were answering questions for customers, and I learned a tremendous amount about the importance of customer service, problem resolution, and in many cases, de-escalation. And really from there, I just kept being intellectually curious to learn about different aspects of banking and different ways that banks can help their clients. And that's really still true today. And I've been so fortunate to have many different roles at Citizens, which allowed me to continue to do that.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Vickery?
Well, I certainly have to echo all of the accolades. I'm so delighted to be on this panel as well. Lisa and Roxanne are some of my heroes for sure in terms of watching them ascend. And Yvonne, there's no one that does it better. You're a great treasure for all of us, a great inspiration, networker, and connector and friend. So thank you. And thank you again to the Chamber. Very similar story in terms of how I started. I was lucky enough to work for a very dynamic woman leader. At that time in the mortgage industry, it was not an industry I thought I would end up in by any stretch of the imagination. But at that time, there were more women in mortgage and there were more women realtors at that time. So it was a very easy, area to get involved in. And fortunate for me, again, the manager that I worked for, she was very dynamic, a brilliant salesperson, very strategic and fearless politically at that time. So for me, it was very inspirational to see the drive of new business and to work in wealth management essentially at that time, if you will, and watch the wealth creation, understand how different fields, different families made their wealth, created their wealth, to understand the credit aspects of that and the financial aspects of that was a very key portfolio of skill that I developed. You know, and I think also just understanding how an operation worked from beginning to end, taking an application through to closing and understanding all those pieces and all those functions helped me become a better teammate and partner, which of course you need later to have so many allies internally. So starting in mortgage, I was able to bridge to banking, bridge to investment management, and bridge to the role that I'm in now, which was very fortunate due to, again, some terrific leaders and mentors along the way. You have to do the hard work, as we know, That's key. But as we've always said, you've got to do the hard work and not keep your head down. You've got to keep your head up and make sure people know what your aspirations are, know that you're interested in doing other things and learning new skills. So it's why I've stayed in wealth management. I've enjoyed the journey.
Thank you, Vickery, and thank you. You are one of the women leaders that I had the honor of having as my role model and mentor throughout my career. So I appreciate that very much. And I hope you realize that you have helped many, many women, not only in the Commonwealth, but I know across the globe, given that you are a global leader. So thank you for that. And Lisa and Roxanne and you all three of you really had a lot of themes. It was around representation, being intentional, evolving throughout your career, learning new skill sets. And I love that that I believe two or all of you referenced a woman leader helping you along the way or bringing you on, which we all know that we need to see more of, right? So thank you for that. I want to pivot now to the conversation around talent, specifically what has been called by economists she-cession. And it pains me to see women leave the workforce in the middle of a crisis because we know very well that women leadership in the middle of crisis is exactly what is needed, right? We have just this great ability to stay focused on the end game and rule out the noise and really strategize around how we're going to get somewhere when times get tough. So this is something that we really need to address. We know that the pandemic has forced many women to leave the workforce, and they branded it she-cession. There's still a lot of work to be done as we look to close the gender diversity gap that's prevalent specifically in our industry and financial services. So what needs to happen to encourage more women to enter? I'd love to talk about what can we do to get them to return to and stay in the financial and banking sector to keep the gender and racially diverse talent pipeline growing in the industry. So Lisa, maybe we can start with you, but any advice or your perspective on the role we can play in helping close this gap?
Yeah, it's just such an important question to ask. And there's just no question the pandemic has been a game changer in the way that business gets done. And the impact on women being successful in the workforce has been even more significant with the challenges of competing priorities like childcare and elder care. And we also know that the last year and a half has been really hard on all of us, mentally, emotionally, and on our kids. And that's just a huge strain on all of us. And we know that women continue to carry more of the day-to-day management of home life, which has exacerbated an already problematic diversity gap. So I just think it's imperative that we attract women to the finance industry and more importantly, keep them here. That requires exposing girls to a possibility of a career in finance early on and then supporting them during different life stages of their career. One of the things that Citizens has done to address this is we work with some amazing organizations that are targeting low and moderate income kids, particularly girls, who traditionally avoid male-dominated industries and jobs. Invest in Girls is one of the fabulous partnerships we support that provides high school girls with an opportunity to meet with bankers, learn about this career, and develop skills and interests in the industry. But likewise, we also support Girls Who Code and Black Girls Code, again, to attract women to the IT field, which generally is fairly male-dominated. I would also say that one of the things I'm really particularly proud of here at Citizens is our commercial banker development program, where we recruit directly from colleges, candidates with various majors. And we recruit approximately, I'd say 20 to 25 colleagues a year. And consistently, we've made sure that they're half women, half men, up to 30% are diverse candidates. So we can really foster a feeder program to make sure that we have a continuing flow of diverse and women candidates coming into the industry. And interestingly, yesterday I was speaking with Kathleen Murphy of the Mass Bankers Association, and she is launching a similar program, which you may have read about in the paper, which some of our smaller and community banks are supporting for a credit analyst apprenticeship program. So I'm thrilled to see there's a lot of creative thinking going on out there to try to address this issue, because we really do need to think creatively here.
Thank you, Lisa. All great examples. Roxanne or Vickery, anything to add?
Well, I'm smiling, Lisa, right? Because I think people may look at us and see us as competitors, right? Citizens Bank, JP Morgan, BNY Mellon, but we are from an industry. I think we have to come together as an industry to address an issue that's happening in the community. So I'm smiling because some of the things that Lisa mentioned are spot on and exactly what we're doing in terms of programming and collaborating. And so as we think about, how do we attract? It starts with, and Yvonne, you brought up this great point around what does the C-suite look like? Who's in the C-suite, and representation does matter. So if you're looking to attract diverse talent, then your OC and your C-suite has to look like that because people are watching. So PwC did, a great study, and thank you, Laura. And the study talked about why people are leaving, right? So this great secession or the great resignation, it's about people really having this just reflection point and inspecting, who am I, what do I want to do, and what does my company offer? So if I go around the room, the things that was in that report, it's probably the things that's on our minds and on our employee minds. Wages, are they competitive? Benefits, are there benefits that address what Lisa was talking about around the childcare? Is your company having those things to support? Do you have groups like what we have internally, right? Women on the Move, that really attracts and supports women businesses and financial health, but it's also about growth and career mobility, giving people a forum or parent group like our BRG to give people a forum to talk about. Sometimes it's just having that platform to be able to share how you're feeling. Do you have internal programs and benefit programs where you're addressing the mental and the physical health? As a matter of fact, are we showing up and listening to our employees? Are we hearing what's happening internally so that we can pivot? Someone mentioned to me yesterday that this pandemic, the 4 Ps, it's been the 4 Ps: politics, pandemic, protest, prejudice. And I want to add 2 Ps to that, and Jackie Glenn shared that. And the 2 Ps for me is pivot and people. The pandemic has taught us how to pivot, and the focus is on people. So your benefits have to reflect that. And you can't have a broad stroke and broad brush, right? So you have to be intentional. And if it's women issues, you have to have a program focused on women issues. So I really agree with what Lisa is saying around what does that benefit look like, but what does the representation look like? Because that's how we're going to be able to have that empathy to understand women's issues, is if you have women at that table.
Well said, Roxanne. Vickery, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I would agree with everything my colleagues here have discussed as well, and just say, if there is a benefit, if you will, from the pandemic, it's been that the hybrid work is here to stay. That is one of the areas that employers and employees have come to terms with, and certainly there'll be a small population of people potentially that are in the office in our industries that are highly regulated and that need to have that consistency of employees in the office at all time, which of course will be a job share and have to have equality and coverage. There'll be a group that will be remote that was probably never possible before under certain areas and certain circumstances. And then this big middle part of our population, we're all starting to work through and work out what that will be in terms of providing more accommodations for people that want that flexibility, need that flexibility, as we've talked about, for many, many reasons, and that can work in that more elastic setting, if you will. And in terms of Boston, I think this is an opportunity for us to reinvigorate our workforce with all of the great niches we have here that are just so, we're so fortunate to have the deep wealth of life sciences, educational, academic, medical, tech, financial services. So in many regards, I think this is going to make us, even more successful ultimately by adding this dimension for our employees.
Vickery, I want to stay on Sorry, I want to stay on what you just discussed. And when you were actually introducing yourself, you also brought up how, as the industry changed and your role changed, you learned new skills and you had to develop new skills in order to remain relevant and be able to continue to progress throughout your career. And as organizations are starting to think about the workforce of the future, or the workplace of the future, the word reskilling comes up a lot. And what are the characteristics and the traits that employees will need in order to remain relevant and help organizations transform and innovate? So for any of you, Roxanne, Lisa, or Vickery, how can the reskilling of current members of the workforce, maybe those looking to elevate their careers or change their careers, be addressed to increase gender equity? I know some of you touched lightly on it. If anyone has any more to say, we're getting a few questions specifically on that, and I'd love to be able to elaborate more on that.
Well, I would start with, first of all, it's the technology, right? In terms of the reskilling. When I think about, and I'm going to stay on this equity piece of it, because that's, for me, that's purposeful, intentional, and personal, and racial equity. And in gender equity, as we think about the workforce and those who are going to be left behind as we come back to economic recovery, it's how do we have inclusive economic recovery? And as we think about some of the industries that's heavily more so with women and the racial portions, it's the service industry, right? And there's a lot of that, right? Hospitality, service industry. And the industry will come back, but it would look different. And so will the financial services industry. As we think about our industry, it's about that relationship piece. So employees are looking for that as a differentiator. How are we having internal development programs to help them? Mentoring is part of that, right? Because some of that is through sharing. But the other piece, and I know there's a lot of programs in Boston that offers it, how are you providing them with professional development through some of the external partnership programs like the partnership? How are you connecting them with Alpha and other programs, right? And that helps to build their network, but also their skills. So we have to be, I think, flexible. We have to figure out how to put that internal program together and really think ahead, because what was relevant today in terms of the skills is going to be different tomorrow. So we have to be forward thinking to say, what does tomorrow look like? It's more around that relationship building. It's about that people-centric piece. So how do you teach that? But also, how do you bring that to the schools? And one of the things that JP Morgan Chase is doing is really partnering, especially with HBCUs, to look at their programs, right? We've done the same thing with, schools here. How do you look at their programs at the schools to make sure it is relevant to what's going to happen in the workforce so that they can be ready when they're coming into the workforce?
Thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more, Roxanne. I think to find the solution, we all have to work together, whether it's private sector, public sector, nonprofits, government. We all have to have the conversation. So we need to get from the business community, where are there pockets of need? Where are you not finding the right skill set? Then we have to work through either our community colleges or what have you to make sure that we're training people on the things that are going to be needed in the future. And I don't think you can do it in silos. I think you really have to have that conversation and work in partnership. And I think, by doing that, we can get a greater outcome. And I think those conversations are starting to happen more and more as we realize that we have to work together to solve these issues.
There's just absolutely no question that the diversity, equity, and inclusion is critical. It starts at the top with all of our firms for sure. And it's putting together processes and procedures to measure that improvement. I know today our wealth management team, which is led by a woman, Catherine Keating, 50% of our staff are now women and 40% are VP and higher. At her table, at the direct reports table, 50% are diverse. And that is a very intentional plan that the firm has executed from the top down. And it is something that we measure all the time. So the reskilling and retraining, everything, as Roxana said and Lisa said, is accelerated so quickly. So the technology is key. We've got to make sure that we're keeping a very focused, sharp eye on not just the hiring, but the retraining and the, as you would say, retooling to make sure that our employees stay, are highly engaged and highly successful. We do, as I'm sure our other firms do, very intentional succession planning and professional development, as you've said, skill training, leadership, mentorship training, to ensure that it's certainly more valuable to have an employee stay longer with us and have more skills than to lose a key valued constituent and have to retrain again. So it's really an enterprise initiative at BNY Mellon, one we're very proud of and one we're continuing to learn and develop, certainly along the way to make sure we're attracting a healthy and diverse population to be competitive ahead. My last comment was just, the McKinsey study was a very valuable one because it showed us that women are the fastest growing segment. It is the key segment for all of us to focus on. Today, it's about a third of the wealth management industry, 12 trillion, which will more than double to be 30 trillion by 2030. So we've got to do the work now to continue to remain competitive in that marketplace and attractive.
Thank you all three for all three great observations and perspectives. And Vickery, specifically on the measurement side, right? What gets measured gets managed, and we need to do a better job of applying metrics to all of these programs and holding leaders accountable. So thank you for all of your insights. I wanted to pivot to clients. We've talked a lot about employees and programs, internal programs. But we're an industry where we all serve clients, and they have been top of mind. And I'm actually getting a lot of questions on the chat. So I'll touch on clients, and then I'm going to pivot back to the questions because we're getting a lot of great questions from the audience. But I found that when the pandemic started and then the crisis, the various crises that came along after, our clients were really looking for insights from us, whether it be how are we handling the pandemic, how are we handling the race crisis. And we found ourselves spending a lot of times with our clients, of course, talking about the business, but I would say that a large percentage of our time with them was really on just everything happening around us. I'd love to hear your insights and what you experienced, what was top of clients' minds when you and your teams met with them and continue to meet with them. And Lisa, perhaps you can kick us off.
Sure, and it's evolving. I think, for me, when the pandemic first hit, everyone was just panicking. We didn't know what this was going to look like. And I know that for me, the PPP program, I spent more time with my clients during that hectic 2.5-week period where we were all just trying to figure out how we could be helpful to one another. And I would say without question, that was everyone's focus 24/7 for 2 straight weeks as we tried to pivot, another P word, pivot to be able to help them. And I would say that, I've worked at Citizens for 24 years, and I have never been so proud of how my organization sort of stepped up and really focused on what was in front of us, and got creative in terms of getting the PPP money out. Currently, I would say, though, that what I'm hearing from our clients is that, for our clients and for the bank, quite honestly, is that it's the intensive competition for talent in the labor market. And, we've talked about this, that we need the skills, but, there's a lot of people that are opting out of the workforce now. And it's going to take years and years of investment to get that back. And I think, if you read Governor Baker's report, he said that we need to reskill 30 to 40 thousand employees a year continuously in order to bridge that gap. And we're also trying to think outside the box and partner with our clients. We did a job fair last spring, Lawn on D, where we brought candidates, 1,100 candidates, and all of our clients were there to interview them. And it was really interesting to see how appreciative our clients were that their bank, which would not normally be the place you go to look for employment help, went outside the box and thought about how to be helpful. And we are also working with all of our community partners. Year Up is a great one, and they're listening to us about what we need, and trying to fill that skill gap. So that's really, I think, it's just a complex situation, and we need to work together to solve it.
I'm going to chime right in there and say ditto to what Lisa just said. Similar programs that we're working through, but I recall that PPP period, Lisa, and we were all thrust into this environment where we had to learn it together, get the technology going fast, right? So we had to really innovate, but we knew that we needed to do that because small businesses were the ones that were most impacted. And Yvonne, we've had these conversations many times as we launched Small Business Strong and talked about how that's impacting small business. And we have to pay attention to small businesses, right? Because those are the economic engine of our local communities. They're the ones who hire locally and hire the local talent. And so our small business customers are telling us that same thing around talent, but it's also how do we find, the funding to be able to go through that? So the PPP was really impactful there. And we know we had to get funds into their hands to be able to save that. In terms of the talent, very similar year up, we convert about 60% of our interns. And from my side of the business, right, my role is to expand and open all the branches in the New England footprint. And so when you think about talent and this challenge for talent, when you're opening a branch, and you have to open 50, 60 branches and staff it with about 10 people each, now how much we have to go out there and be intentional about our talent pool. And so we get that from the schools and so forth. And so those are the things that we've had to do to make sure, Yvonne, as you asked the question, that we were really focused and listened to our customers, our nonprofit partners we were listening to. We support, minority deposit institutions because it's not just JP Morgan Chase, right? Customers are going to those institutions as well, CDFIs, so they can lend out into the community. So we had to be really thoughtful and be collaborative in our approach. Now, from a branch perspective, during the pandemic, it wasn't about products, it was about people. So our team just picked up the phone and checked in. How are you doing? What can we do? Those were the questions, and the customers were sharing their concerns as they were building relationships and trust with us. So it was really things that bother each and every one of us. College, home, how am I going to pay for my home? How am I going to pay rent? And it was our job then to be able to help them to find that roadmap. Now it's just around what's happening, what's going to happen with the future, what's going to happen with all of the variants. How will that impact my business? What can we do to be proactive and be strategic around our business? So that's where we're collaborating with our clients now to answer those questions.
Well, similarly, I think where we started is evolved quite a bit, because as we all did back, in March of 2020, we all went to remote, or 90% of our employees went remote and 10% were in the office. So quickly, we had to focus first on our clients and make sure, as you said, Yvonne, that we're executing well. As Lisa and Roxanne have said, that we've stayed connected with them. To help with that, we had to really expedite our webinars and conference calls. So we started a weekly conference call with our chief investment officer every Monday, so clients could call in addition to outbound calls. Executing and making sure that they understood the implications of the pandemic on their portfolios, on their families, that we could be a resource and be there and available was key. Second was the colleagues, ensuring the safety and wellness of our colleagues, both in the office and externally, and making sure they were connected. So again, we added daily market calls to give people updates on the markets, which we've continued to this day. We added another weekly informational session from subject matter experts to share more behind the scene tips or planning or skills we could share with clients. And we also added, to stay connected with our staff, our CEO roundtables every week that became monthly and quarterly. But we connected with our employees on a much more regular basis to make sure that they were safe, secure, as well. Our third C is obviously culture. At first, it was just making sure people had, the technology at home, it worked, it was sufficient, that they had the opportunity to work remotely. And now it's more about that quality of that environment, both in the office and not. In some cases, we asked people to come back to work on a voluntary basis because they wanted a break from, either family situation or needed a break in terms of childcare coverage and wanted to come back in the office And we had to do that sooner than we expected, quite frankly, in some cases. And our fourth C was control, because again, we're highly regulated. We've got to ensure the confidentiality, the cybersecurity of working in a remote framework, which all is table stakes and yet difficult to execute. So like others have mentioned, I think I'm remarkably proud of the work that the team has done. And I would say we all have gotten much more personally closer because of that engagement. And that only lasts from day to day, week to week, because we've got to make sure we're connecting with all clients and our constituents, our colleagues, and also doing it in a way that's very safe and secure from a control standpoint, and create that culture that is BNY Mellon or another firm.
Thank you, Vickery. And I've had the pleasure of watching all three companies that you represent, how you reacted to the pandemic, how you treated your employees through the network. Your employees are represented, and so I've heard firsthand how the empathetic leadership, just the care of making sure that that they felt safe and cared for, and helping them just with anything that came up. So really congratulations to the leadership and to all three firms for how you've navigated through this pandemic. Roxanne in particular, I think one of the silver linings that this pandemic showed us was just how leaders from across different industries, private, public, government come together to address needs. And we launched Small Business Strong together with the Chamber and many other organizations. And since then, we've been able to help close to 2,000 small businesses throughout the Commonwealth. But that was a product of individuals and leaders throughout the Commonwealth, just like the three of you that just cared and wanted to do the right thing and help. So congratulations. It really is remarkable what we have been able to accomplish as a community in such a short period of time. So ladies, we have a lot of questions. Apparently you triggered a lot of interest in your initial comments. So I need to pivot back to kind of where we started, because the group chat is coming in really fast. And I want to make sure that the audience has their questions addressed as well. So let's see, there's one that keeps coming up, so we'll start with that. As a mentor, how have you been keeping the connection with your hybrid teams? Any advice for creating and maintaining that relationship when we are not necessarily in the office with our employees? I know that's a concern for many managers, perhaps. I don't know, Vickery, as running a global organization, I know that this is common for you, right? To not always have your team in an office. And I believe, Roxanne, you too have had that experience. Is there any words of wisdom for managers that are trying to manage hybrid teams that perhaps are now in different locations?
Well, we've certainly tried a number of different tactics, both nationally and regionally. So in addition to a formal mentor program, which is usually a smaller group, we expanded that regionally to be every single person in New England, starting there, to have a mentor and rotate every 6 months as a way for the new hires that have come in that don't know everyone because they haven't been able to walk around and meet people in the hallways, as a way to get more one-on-one with different constituents. We certainly have instituted a weekly employee survey to get feedback instantaneously, essentially, in terms of what's on people's minds. One of the big initiatives that BNY Mellon took on was this career pathing, particularly for, I would say, younger and mid-level employees that were very much struggling with what and how to navigate in a big firm. And so the firm globally took on an initiative to put together a blueprint and a playbook for every job family, and show from the entry level up to mid and senior what the skill level needed, the experience level needed. So as managers not just had their mid-year reviews and year-end reviews, we had intentional career conversations to go through that framework and talk to individuals at the earliest level, mid or senior levels, about what their desires were from career pathing. That has been a huge satisfier. It's also the things of making sure people know about the employee resource groups. We've done a number of different sessions that were more fun and personal We ask people to come in and tell a story and share a story, bring in a photograph of something meaningful. It could be a family, it could be, a quote artifact, as we would call it, and to share personal stories in smaller and bigger groups. This was all done virtually. And now we're working through virtual to digital to in-person and trying to do all three. So it's just about engagement and maintaining that engagement at all levels.
Thank you. Roxanne, Lisa, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. And so, as I mentioned, I lead the branch franchise. So unfortunately, we didn't have the luxury of having to work remotely, right? But others did. And so it was about, I say to my team, it's about being authentic. Yes, we have work to do, but be human first, right? It's lead with empathy, lead with compassion. The things that was happening outside, the pandemic, all those things that were happening outside our walls were happening to our employees, or our employees were seeing it, viewing it. So, I think the pivotal moment for us was when we just started to have courageous conversations. We did not shy away from having the conversations around politics, pandemics, protest, or prejudice. And our meetings, we repurposed meetings where it was just about those conversations. And so that's that authenticity where employees, when we talk about culture, that you can lose culture a little bit in a hybrid environment. You don't have to lose culture if you implement things, but do it through technology. Yvonne, as I took on during the pandemic was when I assumed the Pennsylvania region, and I did meet my team. We were doing these conversations and connecting remotely, but I was human. And as they said, Roxanne was the real deal. And for me, the acronym is, you got to be relatable. You got to lead with empathy. You have to be accessible. And you have to listen with empathy. And so as we talked through that, that's how I encourage the leaders to also do the same thing with their teams. And the teams bought in, understood, they were able to have open doors. And with that, that translated to the customers. There were, as a time where you would say, you have to be yourself one way, and when you're in work, you're at work, right? Yes, there's professionalism, but you also have to be real, and you have to be yourself. Your employees see that. That's what culture is all about. When I took over the PA region and I was leading remotely, the first opportunity I got to meet in person with them, they said, Roxanne, I just realized we're going to meet in person physically for the first time, because you made, 300 miles seem like 1 mile. If we lead with empathy, compassion, and you're accessible, then your employees will be able to connect. It's that connectivity.
I love that, Roxanne. I'm not surprised they call you the real deal.
Yeah, and I have very little to add, because I think Victoria and Roxanne took words out of my mouth. But I just think the connectivity is so key, right? Particularly now, it always has been, but for today, it's just so important. I used to do wellness checks with my team, and I would call up and I say, we're not talking about business, and I just want to see how you are. And there's something cathartic about being able to just kind of say, yeah, I'm struggling, and have that personal relationship, because I think that breeds a different kind of relationship than you have normally if you just talk about business all the time. So again, I think that's one of the lessons learned for me, was just to kind of hit the pause button every once in a while and just say, how you doing?
I agree, Lisa. And I hear the three of you talk about everything you did to make sure that that others were okay. And perhaps a little bit later, I'd love to hear how did you do? Right. Sometimes as leaders, we're so focused on our teams and our home lives, making sure the kids, the parents, and our employees are doing well. Who's checking in on us? So we'll get to that in a little bit, but I think the next question the three of you can relate to. How have you advocated for yourself in your workplaces, especially when you were one of the only women in the room? So I am sure all three of you can relate to this. That will be the last audience question. Then I have one last question I'd love to ask you.
I'll take myself off of mute for a second, because when Vickery said, heads down, and we shouldn't keep our heads down, I was one who kept my head down for a while and didn't raise my hand for a lot, right? Because I would look at the job description and thought, oh, I didn't check all the boxes, right? No more. That's gone. And, I read a book called Shonda Rhimes called The Year of Yes. And I did that about 2016. And that was about saying yes to opportunities, right? And we say yes a lot to others. And that was my pivotal moment to be able to say yes to myself and take risk, take calculated risks. So when I started to just advocate for myself, but it really isn't about advocating for myself also. I have mentors and allies and sponsors who I may not be at that table, but they're speaking about, the things that I'm doing, right? You all said that today, right? Here's what the work that you're doing is showing. But I'm also not afraid. I had my end of year review a couple of days ago with my leader. And here's what I spent time on my end of year review talking about all my accomplishments so he can read it. And then I verbalized it. And then I said, here's what I'm thinking about for what's next. What are your thoughts and how do I get there? So I'm really more intentional about that now, but also telling people where I want to go, because I didn't do that before. I got to JP Morgan Chase because I said something to someone in my network a college friend of mine, and he learned about this opportunity and said, this is the right opportunity for you. So I'm no longer a silent salesman. I tell people what I want to do. And Yvonne, I know you do that. I know what Yvonne wants to do because you've shared that in multiple forums, right? And so now when you share that, you have other sponsors that will help you, allies or mentors, to help you to get there, because you've now put that out into the universe. But I also say you have to perform in the job that you're in while preparing for the next. And I've added to my team, you have to perform with excellence in the job that you're in while preparing for the next. So I'm also doing that for myself.
Thank you, Roxanne. I have one more question. Go ahead, Lisa. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, one of the things that I've consistently done throughout my career, as particularly with looking at new opportunities, is be sort of unapologetically transparent in terms of what you can do and what your priorities are. And I always tell, any future boss, listen, you're going to get your work out of me. It may be in unconventional times of night if my kids have, something important, because I want to still be a mom and a parent at the same time. But, you just have to make sure that you can do both. But to Roxanne's point, you have to perform. But I think honesty is always the best policy in terms of being transparent in terms of what you can do.
Great. Okay, well, I'd like to close with one last question, and it touches on a little bit of what I just spoke about before, this question that you just answered. All three of you have talked about transformation, right, in the sense of what your companies have done, work styles, preparing for the workforce and workplace of the future. But when we close out the conversation today, I wanted to hear how you have coped throughout the pandemic, how you have personally transformed. We're always, as women leaders, so busy taking care of everyone else, whether it's at home or at work. How did you do? How are you doing? When was the last time somebody asked you that? Are you okay? And how have you transformed?
I think we're all nodding. I think we're all nodding, Yvonne, because it depends on the day, depends on the moment, depends on. Right? So it depends. I will say, great right now. I'm in this environment with phenomenal women, but every day is different, right? And I have given myself that grace and mercy to be able to say that if there's a day that I'm not okay, I'm okay saying that, but asking for help and raising my hand. And especially where I think, mental health and seeking assistance, you hear that's taboo, but it's not. We are all going through this environment where we got to seek help, wherever that help comes from, right? Mine is my pastor. And so we have to seek that sort of help. And so every day is different. I take, walks. I tell people now, I don't keep a lot in. I'll express it to confidants on how I'm feeling. And so I try not to wear that Superman cape. I try not to be that all. And I listened to, I was in a session and someone says, just be where your feet are, right? Be where your feet are, be in the moment. So I take a lot of time now to just revel in the moment and take from the moment, knowing that the next moment may not be there. So that's where I am at this moment.
I think that's, again, verbatim. I tell myself I'm going to check my type A personality at the door and give myself a break every once in a while and say, you know what, maybe you're just not going to get all that stuff done today. And that's okay. Because you know, tomorrow's another day and it'll still be there. So I think it's just having some sensibilities and sensitivity to what we're all dealing with, and that we're just trying to get through it the best that we can, and to cut yourself that break.
We we kid about the fact that if it takes 21 days to form a new habit, this has been 21 plus months. So in some cases, there are good habits created, but maybe not. Maybe working too long and being just at your desk at these webinars and Zoom calls for hours on end. You know, how do you break off and find the time to find breaks? And if we don't do it, if we don't take vacation, if we don't work remotely, if we don't come into the office, whatever that is, you know, we're not going to demonstrate that healthy work environment. And it's certainly changed. I think, as I've said, the challenges, the issues, the transformation has all accelerated for good and bad. You know, so there are many families that have been so hurt and have had losses and have had issues. And, you know, I find, and I'm fortunate that people feel open to talk about that together. And I'm doing the same, you know, for sharing more about what's, you know, happening in my family or my life, or issues that I may be struggling with. And of course, the endless resources in our firm, or there are people and you know, expertises available to all of us that probably many of us may not have ventured out to ask for, you know, advice or help, for whether it's employee assistance or whether it's really sharing, you know, with your team, your staff, your colleagues, your friends, what's really going on. And certainly that's been a good and welcome change for me. And again, hopefully if I'm demonstrating it and, you know, opening those doors, other people will feel comfortable to do the same.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And, you know, we were very blessed to have the Women's Network during the pandemic. We would just, we called it the No Agenda meeting. Emily O'Neill came up with it, and it was great. We would just get on Zoom and just check in on each other and talk about how awful or great things were going. So just having kind of that sisterhood and that circle of women leaders to just be there for each other. So we're really blessed to have that. So, but thank you, Roxanne, Vickery, and Lisa. Outstanding conversation. And of course, it's because the three of you are such fearless women and amazing leaders in our community. It really was an honor, is an honor to just be here with you and be able to moderate this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This actually does mark my last event as the chair of the Women's Network, and it has just been such an honor and privilege to lead this distinguished group of women, you know, over the past 3 years. Together, we've done so much. We've created a space of empathy and support for one another during what can only be described as a challenging time in light of the pandemic. We've connected countless women throughout Greater Boston, some who may not have had the opportunity to form these critical relationships otherwise. We've added meaningful amounts of diversity to our board, which I'm extremely proud of because it's resulted in a strong and impactful board. We've also brought additional women to leadership roles throughout our great city. We should all be proud of what we've accomplished together. And I'd also like to thank you for your unwavering support during my time as chair. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. And with that, I would also like to extend a warm welcome to Susan Penta. She's an extraordinary leader. I've gotten to know her throughout the years, always providing great advice, perspective, and we're really lucky to have her. So I look forward to seeing what we can all accomplish together and support Susan under her leadership as she takes on the chairmanship. So thank you for that. And please do not forget to register for our Pinnacle Awards happening January 27th and 28th. It's now open. If you go to bostonchamber.com for more details, you'll see the full list of events and the calendar there. Once again, a huge thank you to our panel and to our sponsor, PwC. Also, congratulations again to all of our Pinnacle honorees. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful and safe holiday season and Happy New Year. I look forward to seeing everyone hopefully in person in 2022. Thank you very much.